Hi, and welcome to our webinar on why self-worth leads to burnout. My name's Dominic Bennett, and I'm the founder and CEO here at On Wellbeing. We've been joined by Hannah Holt, who is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Hannah, but I believe I've got it all right, is an expert in self-acceptance and a confidence coach. And she actually features on quite a couple of our videos on Wellbeing. And if you haven't got access to that, we can sort that out at the end of the webinar. We're also joined by On Wellbeing's head of mental health and wellbeing, Dr Nicola Eccles. Dr Nicola Eccles' background is varied, to say the least. Qualified, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, in physical health, has moved into mental health and behaviour change, and then now specialises in digital health. So thank you very much for joining. If there are any questions, please pop them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar and asking questions towards the end of the webinar. So over to you, ladies. I'll hand over the mic and get cracking.
Thanks so much, Don. Well, welcome everybody. Really excited to start 2024 off with another series of webinars from us. And today, I'm really, really pleased that we're going to be talking about how we feel about ourselves, because this to me is like the forgotten part of mental health, and it's actually the cornerstone of it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we're also going to give you some takeaways. So whether you're a manager who is responsible for a team and is just concerned about mental health and performance, or if you're an individual who struggles and isn't quite sure why, then I think this might be quite an illuminating discussion. And many people listening will start to perhaps think, oh yes, maybe I don't feel as good about myself as I can. So I'm going to do a little bit of background now, and then Hannah is going to come in and talk about probably some more real life experiences and stories, because Hannah is at the coalface working with people every day who are struggling with confidence, with self-worth. So the title of today's session, Why Self-Worth Leads to Burnout. So how is that? How are we making this connection? Well, we're making this connection is when you don't feel very good about yourself, then you're going to engage in detrimental behavior. And I don't just mean you're going to drink too much, or you're going to, I don't know, engage in other risky behavior, although that does, usually come hand in hand. But it means that maybe you're going to be indecisive, and maybe you're not going to feel confident in knowing where you're going or what you're going to say yes to. Maybe you're going to, as a result, lack some boundaries, because when you don't feel very full of self-worth, then you're going to allow opinions and beliefs and the value judgment of others to really infiltrate you. The other thing we're going to have to touch on today is the impact of social media on self-worth. So there's two sort of outlets there. One is we don't feel enough because we're looking around us all the time at what everybody else is doing. And let's remember, this is only a very recent phenomenon. So our mothers, their fathers, generations before us didn't have this. We are the first generation to be experiencing this 24/7 look at everybody else's life and very persuasive marketing around how we should be living. So two aspects of social media. One is we don't feel enough because all we see is everybody doing these amazing things, living these amazing lives. And the other is that our own social media, I'm sure we're all on it to some extent, we place the value judgment of ourselves in the hands of others. And so if we're liked on, let's say it goes all the way from having likes on Instagram or whatever platform you might be on, right down to somebody not responding to you quickly enough on WhatsApp. So our constant way that we live right now means that we are getting a little knife, a little bullet quite frequently around how we feel about ourselves. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody. There are some people who have a Teflon coating who really don't feel the impact of this, who don't care whether they get a like or not, but the majority of us do. So there's there's this way we live now which really impacts our self-worth. It leads to detrimental behavior. And the thing is, when you don't feel good about yourself, actually change will never happen anyway. So let's say you do think I need to get a bit fitter, or you do think I need to stop drinking. It's not going to happen if you don't feel good about yourself. So, investing in feeling good about yourself, as sort of shallow and narcissistic as it sounds, is absolutely vital, and it will transform how you see everything and how you interact with people. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute. We've got so many more things to talk about in this session today, but Hannah, tell me why you can, clearly it's such an important topic that you have based your kind of purpose on helping people to feel more self-worth. Tell me how this has arrived, where it's emerged from.
I think, I wanted to become a self-acceptance coach to help people feel good enough, because I actually burnt out, the topic of this conversation, I burnt out in my corporate job because I didn't feel good enough. I was on this constant quest to get my boss's approval, to get that validation that I belonged in this role, that I was bringing value to this role. And I think we are all in this state of not even being conscious about who we are and how we feel in ourselves, because we're in this autopilot repeating what we did yesterday, because that's where we feel safe. So if we can break into how we are actually feeling and checking in with ourselves, that's when we can start to actually make some changes. So, so many of my clients come to me with, I don't feel good enough at work, or I don't feel good enough to find love. I don't feel good enough to, apply for that promotion or do things differently. So it's, why don't you feel good enough? Well, it's because you've been feeling that way your entire life, connecting to the, as you say, the where the pattern started to originate from. And that's just sort of why we're on this constant quest to be liked, to be approved of, because that means that, we feel safe. There's no threat if we're not liked. So it's, it's a really common thing with, a lot of my clients and a lot of what I see on around us, and just sort of wanting to constantly change to be accepted.
So that's really interesting. If we're not liked, it's threatening. So it's like evolutionary almost. And I don't actually know the biological research on that, but I'm sure there must be some. What we are born with our self-esteem and we die with it, right? I've been reading about that. And so the challenge is to improve it, so you live a life with a high sense of self. And you talked there about that quest for constant approval. So very quickly, we're starting to tie up and join the dots of the title of this webinar today. The exhaustion that comes with seeking approval, whether it's from a partner, a parent, a boss, you're going to get burnt out. It's the burnout is a path, right? So I'm sure many of you listening know that, and this is a starting point, isn't it? Seeking approval. And you just, if there's a takeaway already, we've got this great thing you just said, which is check in with yourself. Because if you don't check in with yourself, then you're constantly just, aligning yourself to everybody else's thoughts. And it's not, what do I think here? And that comes back to one of my kind of takeaways about improving your self-worth, which is to ask yourselves, who am I uniquely? Because if we can recognize our unique self, and this is also true in resilience research, they go hand in hand, like, these are my qualities, I'm this person, I'm that person, you can really believe in those qualities, then you stop seeking approval from others. What do you think about what I said, Hannah, with the clients that you see, in terms of the constant kind of looking around at social media and the impact that has on our sense of self?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, it's connected to always wanting something, right? We all, and even when we get what we want, it's like, okay, what's next? And that, is connected to the burnout as well, because we always want more. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. You get the promotion, then it's the next level up. So it's kind of, we put all this pressure on ourselves. And I think that's also linked to the comparison of social media and other people's lives, that someone else has got it better than us because we don't feel enough in ourselves. So I think it's, again, it's sort of, just connecting back to, as you say, like, what value do I bring? Can I connect to my strengths? What am I really good at? and how can I then start to embody that in other areas of my life where maybe I don't feel good enough? So it's this disconnect from ourselves, this lack of awareness. Why aren't we aware? It's because we're constantly living from our subconscious mind, our habit mind. So by breaking into the awareness, we're breaking into that conscious, and then we can start to consciously respond differently, do different things, start to actually appreciate what we do have rather than looking around and wanting something else,
Okay, so if the kind of first steps are to check in with yourself and just almost take a pause, and then to look at being more aware, how do you, in this fast-paced world, I don't know, parenting, caring for adults, working, commuting, all the other, running a house, all the other things, how do you start? Where does awareness happen? How do you do it? If you've never thought about being more aware of your sense of self and your thoughts, where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, it's, reminding yourself of when you're not aware, when you're driving in your car and you arrive at your destination, you're like, how did I even get here? So it's like, we're not aware. So how can we break into the awareness? We take a deep breath. We put our hand on our heart. We connect to our body. So we're almost living outside of our body in this sort of like fight or flight mode. And if the moment that we can connect back in, we take a deep breath, hand on heart, we go outside in nature, we touch a tree, or, we actually listen to somebody. If you can really be listening here right now, you're in the moment, you're aware of what's going on because you're so focused. So it takes training. Meditation is a great way to come into the awareness, but it's kind of just taking a breath is your quick fire way to come back into your present mind, present body.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I think you've just said we live outside of our body and we're so quick and fast-paced in this world, aren't we, that so many of us do live outside of our body. And we even live outside of our body when we are chilling, when we're binging on Netflix or scrolling our phone. We're still living outside of our body because we're still not really connecting in. So even in our so-called relaxation period, we're never really being aware. Okay, so let's just backpedal a bit. So we've talked about self-worth and how it's the cornerstone of mental health. I've talked about how it can lead to indecision, a lack of boundaries. It can lead to risky behavior. And we've talked a little bit about how you can even begin to kind of take a pause on this self-worth down spiral, if you like, that can lead to burnout. But let's just, we've talked about living outside your body, taking a breath, becoming more aware. But how? Let's just backtrack a bit, because I know that I've worked with clients who've said to me, well, I don't know if I've got low self-worth or not. So where, the questions for me, and maybe Hannah, you can put some of your own thoughts in here. For me, you've not got high self-worth, or you haven't got high enough self-worth if you don't believe you're of equal value to the people around you, if you don't see yourself as good enough, if running through your head is a narrative of, why did you do that? You're always making mistakes, these kind of negative narratives that we have running through our heads. If we don't put ourselves up for things like promotion, or we don't believe we can challenge ourselves, that for me is another sign of low self-worth. Hannah, what other ones might you have if you were trying to, I don't know, evaluate high, medium, low self-worth? If someone's listening to it and thinking, well, I don't know if I've got low self-worth, what would you say there are the markers of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think another one that, is quite familiar with some of my clients is that they don't believe that they're important, that other people's time is more important than theirs. Saying yes to everything, no boundaries. I think another one is sort of not giving yourself any time for self-care. I don't deserve to make time for myself. I don't deserve that bath. It's kind of just lack of awareness of the importance of self, I think, is just, for me, a really, really the big sort of overarching one.
And I think we have to be really honest here, and we have to comment on the cultural influence of this in British culture. It is very derogatory. It is very don't be selfish. So those narratives have come through to us from parents and their parents before them. So there's this concept that we mustn't self-care, which is so ironic, because when we don't self-care, we don't perform well as partners, parents, or at work. So turning that culture around without it seeming to, it's like we just think we're so self-indulgent, don't we, Hannah, as soon as we start to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. So many of my clients just don't dedicate any time for themselves. I don't have time for that. I'm like, well, if you don't have time for yourself, how can you expect to show up in, the best version of yourself, because you're giving your time to everybody else? So it's kind of like, this sort of indulgence of, I couldn't possibly go and do something for myself, because that would be seen to be, I can't think of the word now, but it's sort of going back to that British culture of that, I can't possibly say good things about myself because I don't deserve it. So
yeah, I think that's so I think it's also a cultural thing. And actually, workplaces have got a long way to go, I think. And I know your story of burnout, Hannah. Workplaces have got a long way to go. Let's bring it back to the workplace to even, to even start this path of, recognition and valuing people and saying what people bring to the table and praising them. And we just still don't seem to do that, do we? And would you say that your experience of burnout, because now I'm talking from a kind of workplace perspective, was how did the self-esteem, the low self-esteem, manifest itself in burnout in your experience, Hannah?
Yeah, I guess I was sort of, I didn't know it at the time. I'd always throughout my career been on this sort of quest to prove something, that, I would get to a certain level and then my dad would be proud of me, or I'd get to a certain level and I would finally, I would have arrived, right? And that's another thing. We keep raising the bar because we don't feel enough in where we are right now. And even when we get there, we're like, well, okay, well, I still don't feel enough. What's next? So I think it's when you're in that state of not feeling enough in yourself, in your work environment, and maybe you're trying to prove something to a colleague or a boss, you're kind of not really aware. So I think that was my biggest sort of learning on reflection. Had I know what I know now, but at the time when we're in that sort of that state of not feeling our worth within our work, it's kind of, if you are feeling that way, okay, how can you start to rebuild your worth and start to believe that you do belong there and that you are good enough and you do bring value to that organization and within that role? So it's starting to then to introduce ways of becoming more aware and how you can start to build your confidence with things like, gratitude and movement and all of these other things that I'm sure we're going to come on to at the end. But it's lack of awareness, really.
Yeah, and that really, that's also an organization's responsibility, isn't it? A manager's responsibility to offer that to an individual, because so often we critique. You see, as teachers at school, we're used to being this is what was wrong with that piece of work, and then we experience this all the way through school and into the workplace, as opposed to more of this is what was right and this is what you're doing right. So we're very used to hearing what's wrong as well, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it's also coming back to, the manager is also maybe living and, going about their day, not feeling enough of themselves. So they aren't able to then show praise because they're also waiting for the praise externally too. So it's that if we can validate ourselves, that is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what anybody else says to us. That, that's what we need to focus on. That's what we need to work on, that internal validation.
Yeah, so this is it, isn't it? Because what happens when we place our self-esteem in the value judgments of others? Well, what happens is that we're on an emotional roller coaster. And, young people today are on the worst one of all, aren't they, in terms of the living through the value judgments of others through the phone. And it's very difficult to stop that. So let's just talk about how we actually stop placing value on how others see us. It's incredibly difficult. I don't think we should underestimate how difficult that is. And I think rather than trying to stop that, because that's almost impossible, it's such a learned behavior, instead you start trying to, as you've just said, Hannah, place more value on your internal system. So setting your own achievable goals. So a lot of the work on self-esteem, a lot of the research talks about, right, how are we going to actually build self-esteem? What does it actually look like? Well, accepting praise is one of them. The research suggests that we, build achievable goals. So let's not say, if we've never run before, well, I'm going to run a marathon in 4 months, because that's not going to set you up for success. What's an achievable? I'm going to run a 5K by the end of the month. Yes, that's achievable. And sometimes when our self-worth is so low, we actually make kind of wildly, I suppose, inflated things almost as a sort of, I think is a bit counterproductive. Maybe we won't get them, and that'll just confirm then that we're not worthy, right? So we're trying to confirm this belief that we have that we're not worthy. So let's break that cycle apart and instead start to say things like, right, well, here's an achievable goal, and I'm going to accept this compliment. Another thing that the science suggests is that when you hear yourself say something like, oh, I'm rubbish at numbers, I'm terrible at languages, I'm so bad at physical activity, you have to then say to yourself, because, and you have to tell yourself why you have that belief. Then you have to counter it. So this is where the work comes in. If you want to start changing your self-esteem, you counter it. You say, right, I'm no good at physical activity. Why? Oh, because I was terrible at PE at school. Awful. Okay, now you have to counter this. Yeah, but I walked, I don't know, 6 miles with some friends the other weekend. Okay, well, that's physical activity. So you're actually, that's not a true judgment. It's not a, that value thing there isn't true. So it's constantly countering it. Hannah, have you got any other kind of direct, actual self-esteem building tips, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, our words have so much power, right? So if we're
Mm.
constantly living from a I'm not good enough, or I'm not good at speaking in public, well, you created that identity for yourself. So how can you start to change that? You can start to embody the feeling of I'm a great speaker. How does a great speaker show up? Well, how do they dress? How do they speak? How do they stand? Because it's all about connecting to the feeling, and also visualizing and connecting to the person who we want to be. Not saying that who we are is not enough, but if you are struggling with something, it's flipping the narrative, isn't it? It's starting to use language which is supportive, which is encouraging. So I do a lot of work with affirmations and, starting to reframe the narrative, the old words of lack, of not believing in ourselves, of not being enough. It's changing it. I'm great. I'm doing my best. I'm showing up. I'm trying. I'm, starting to change and create a new identity for yourself. And also just connecting back to what you were saying about setting realistic goals. I had a client of mine that was talking about, if I get to the end of the year and I've hit my targets and I've helped various different clients, then I'll feel proud of myself. And I was like, well, outside of the targets, yeah, that's really tangible, but how will you know if you've helped enough people? When is enough enough? So it's, connecting back to what is actually realistic.
What is enough, though? That's such a hard one, Yeah. But I suppose the point we're trying to make is you have to value yourself whether or not you got to enough. You have to believe that inherently. And it's incredibly difficult to balance goals and aims, which are healthy and good, and direction with, but I'm good enough. So for me, what's so interesting is when we want to change or do something different, I don't know, drink less, be less stressed, be less anxious. If we do it from a place of low self-worth, it's probably not, those changes won't happen. We're more likely to make changes when we feel good about ourselves. But the time that people try and make changes is when they feel bad about themselves. So my work with clients and on the work I do on wellbeing is often to get people to see, right, if you can get yourself to feel better about yourself first and feel like you're okay as you are, actually then you're going to make those changes. And people find that concept really hard to wrap their head around, because they think, but no, I've got to think I'm awful, I'm, gross, I'm so lazy, and I've got to, it's like a boot camp. When I speak to myself like that, then I'm going to whip myself into shape. But it just doesn't work, because like I've said so many times, if you speak to a child negatively, their behavior will not change. They won't respond to that. What do you think about that, Hannah, about trying to start from a place of self-worth to make changes? Because of course we should all change and grow. I mean, that's healthy, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the great example is that, come 1st of January, we've eaten loads of food, we've drunk loads of food, and they're like, I want to lose 2 stone. Oh, because it's coming from a place of punishment. And I often say to anyone who comes to me with that, is that if you can just have compassion for yourself right now, if you're coming at it from a place of, I want to lose this weight because I want to feel good in myself, I want to feel healthy, I want to be able to run in the park with my kids, rather than I've eaten lots and I'm a real pig and I've been really awful to myself, for coming at that that real punishment or language almost.
The punishment language is exactly right.
Yeah, we're so awful to ourselves. So I do a lot of work on sort of compassion. How can you support yourself? How can you nurture yourself? How can you be kind to yourself? How can you talk to yourself like you would do a small child? Because that language is going to put your body back again into that calm state, parasympathetic nervous state, and then you can start to make change. If you're in that constant fight or flight, punishment, you're not going to get anything done. You're just going to make yourself feel worse.
It's just so hard for people to believe that, though, because the concept of kind of putting yourself down and punishing yourself to then change is really, I don't know where we got that drummed into us, but we did. And there's that very almost self-indulgent feel if we're nice to us. If we do something wrong and then we say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's like, we don't want to say that to ourselves, do we? But as soon as you put heightened stress on a situation, as we said with a child, if you tell them off, if you're shouting about a situation, they then change because of the telling off, as opposed to altering the behavior because they really need to alter the behavior. And it's about us making sustained changes in ourselves. I'm good enough, but I still want to, I don't know, do better in my public speaking role, or do better with my everyday drinking habits, but I still love myself. And it's just so difficult. People find it so awkward. If we just bring it back to the workplace, to that link with burnout again, because I think anybody that manages people that's listening might think, right, well, I don't know how I can directly influence this, because you're talking about people, doing it for themselves, placing more value on themselves. And that is absolutely right. That is what we believe. But I think in the workplace, there are some really key ways that self-esteem comes out, low self-esteem comes out. People, reading emails in the wrong way, and it actually really affects communication in the workplace. People take something personally, and then they maybe react badly back, and then we've got this sort of snowball effect of emotions that didn't need to be there in the first place. And that's because of low self-worth. Low self-worth causes people to not feel confident enough to put themselves up for things, to do work, because they think, oh, I can't do it. So then they got stuck in the procrastination space as well. So although I am saying that it's up to individuals in themselves to start to look and change their self-belief, I think that people managers can support it by drawing out unique qualities of teams and saying, that's okay, you don't need to all be doing the same as one another. Your unique qualities are brilliant, and that's how you are. That the kind of individual approach, I think, is really helpful in the workplace. Is there anything else that you think that managers could do to support growth of self-esteem and self-worth in the workplace, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I as much as it is that, managers have got a tough gig, but I think it's also, leading by example and inspiring the team as well. And if you don't know what leading by example feels, then who inspires you within your organization, or, you know, someone you've seen on LinkedIn who's done amazing things, you know, because we strive to be the best, but who can we learn from? And even that goes back to social media. You know, if you're following people that make you feel like crap, then who can you start to follow that makes you feel good, that you can learn from? You know, we always want to glow, and that's where we start to create a new identity and be a manager who can lead by example and lead from their strengths, rather than coming from a place of lack and weakness and comparison and you know, worrying about saying the wrong thing, which I know is tough.
Yeah, I think, you know, self-worth and resilience, some of the suggestions we're making are very closely linked. So, you know, when we have high self-worth, it's a buffer against life's negative experiences, which we know come at us fast and furious all day, every day. And so I think managers showing a level of vulnerability, because we know that, you know, with resilience and self-worth, when you show vulnerability, that's a good starting point, even though conversely it feels like you're being less resilient. Actually, you're being more resilient. Tapping into your unique qualities, I suppose, as a manager, and saying, but I'm not able to do X, Y, and Z, because that's not, you know, I can't do everything. I can't be everything. So, you know, I'm vulnerable. I can only do this much. And I suppose showing their whole self in that way. But it's difficult and it's uncomfortable. And I know that with people I talk to, a lot of them still say, I don't want to bring my whole self to work. You're going to get my work self, because I don't want to show that piece of me. But if we all walk around like that, we're probably not getting out of ourselves as much as we could. What do you think about that, Hannah, about that argument, I suppose? So today, many of us, myself included, in mental health, talk about, you know, sharing your thoughts at work, being vulnerable, communicating, being open. And yet the truth on the shop floor, as I say, with people I talk to, is like, that's fine, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
It makes me feel awkward. What would you say
yeah.
to that?
Yeah, I saw something last year that was talk about like leading from the heart and work, you know, because we are all human beings after all, right? So if we can be vulnerable, be kind, like check in with our work colleagues, how can we support each other? How can we, you know, quite a few organizations that I've worked with have sort of create these kindness challenges or gratitude challenges where we're all like, who helped you today? Or who can you thank today? Who can you send an email that says, actually, you know what, you supported me today? So I think it's just, you know, kindness and connection. We're all craving that connection and community, you know, so it's how inviting a bit more of that in, I think, will definitely help, because when we're kind to others, it makes us feel good. We can't, you know, it's
Yeah.
default. So it's, you know, doing more of that really gives us that little boost in our own self.
Yeah, okay. So I think what you're saying is, although people might feel awkward, we've still got to push this door open, whether people like it or not. Because when you're open, authentic, and kind, you're going to get that moment of connectedness at work. And when you connect with actual people, then everything starts to become a little bit easier. You feel more relaxed, you feel better about yourself. If we're all working in bringing half of ourselves in a stressed state, only think of performance, you actually don't perform your best at all. You perform best in a flow state, right? We all know that. Whatever work it is you're doing, where you're relaxed and focused, that's the ideal and optimal state for most jobs, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So trying to achieve that. So one of the things we mentioned a minute ago, and I just want to touch on again, because it's obviously critical to many elements of psychological well-being, is gratitude. So how does gratitude and self-esteem and burnout, how do those three little triangular things come together for you, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, gratitude is a huge part of my own personal journey. You know, when I was living from a place of real hardship, that, you know, the moment I started to connect back in to appreciate what I did have, looking around, you know, the things that we take for granted. And when we live from that place of contentment, then we can start to notice more of it. So again, it comes back to retraining our mind to look at what do we have, what's going well, rather than what do we lack and, you know, don't want. So I think that when you are in that gratitude mindset, you know, you can't help but feel content and supported, which that then connects to, you know, our worth. And then from connecting burnout with that, I guess, you know, gratitude is an awareness exercise, right? Because we're asking ourselves, I'm grateful for this right here, right now. That is then going to give us the tools to not burn out, because we're going into our day feeling content and supported. And then we're creating more awareness around, okay, how are we feeling? Am I working too hard? Do I need to take a break? So I think, you know, burnout, as we know, is when the body takes over, it shuts down. So I think the more awareness that we can create into our day, and more that we can appreciate, the more that we can avoid that.
Yes, okay. So by being grateful, we are pausing, we're looking at what we have. It, you know, directly engages with our self-worth, if you like, which helps us to set boundaries in our day, to engage in self-care, which we've touched on a little bit. We haven't talked too much about, but I think I started at the top of this call today saying, look, if you don't have high self-worth, you're not going to look after yourself. So you're actually not likely to exercise, eat right, engage in activities that help in your mind if you don't feel good about yourself. So the self-care mantra is also a great preventative against burnout too. So I'm aware of time, and I want to leave time for a few questions. We've talked about gratitude a little bit. Hannah, we talked about a self-care check-in, and I would just like you to go back over that now, so listeners can sort of take that away with them, I think. So, you know, we've just talked at length about the link between self-care and self-worth and self-esteem. How do we do a self-care check-in? What little, I know you've talked on the app as well about practices. What could they be?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really important question is to ask at the start of each day, and really get intentional. How do I want to feel today? Okay, I want to feel productive. I want to feel focused. I want to feel inspired. Okay, what can I do in order to feel that way? How can I go about my day feeling inspired? Is it, you know, learning from someone? Is it asking for help? So it's connecting to the feeling, and then how you can start to embody that. So I ask that every single morning. How do I want to feel? What do I need to do in order to feel that way? Or even just, you know, we're still at the beginning of the year, you know, having that check-in with yourself. What's working? What's not? How can I make some changes? It's sort of creating that awareness. But the start of every day, do a few moments of gratitude. Even just 3 things. What am I grateful for today? Take a deep breath. How do I want to feel today? You know, so many of my clients come to me and say, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to meditate. You don't need to meditate. Just have a check-in. Couple of questions. That's all you need to do.
I think that's really important, because I visualize this self-worth, self-esteem bubble. And I know that many people that I talk to will say, that's nice for people that have got time to do that. It's not nice if you've got, I know, 2 little kids scrambling over you and a job to get to, and, you know, the dog's made a mess on the floor. So how, you know, it's saying to people, look, it's minutes, it's little minute breaks, and actually you should have them throughout the day. How am I feeling right now? How am I feeling about myself? And that is a challenge. That is where the work is, because most of us just want to pick up our phones and distract ourselves. We always want to distract ourselves from ourselves, because when we look at ourselves, we don't always want to do that bit, because it's a bit sticky, a bit icky, and we don't always like what we see. So we're encouraging you, whether it's managing people or you as an individual, to just, if nothing else, have frequent breaks in the day where you just pause for 5 minutes. You just don't look at anything, and you think, how am I feeling? What do I want to happen in the next couple of hours? So that you're not on autopilot, so that you are aware, so that you come to the end of the day and you think, God, I feel like I know who I am today, and I know what I've got through. What do you think, Hannah? Micro breaks of awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I set reminders throughout my day to have that check-in with myself.
On your phone or
On my phone, yeah, and they're also on my laptop connected as well. Just moments throughout the day where I can just start to embody the feeling of joy. How would it feel? Another great one is to ask yourself, what would make today great? What do I need to make today great? Is it having a really great meeting? Is it having this amazing webinar with you? Is it, you know, that again, and that is setting an intention and starting to then, use just even that question as a way to almost manifest how you want your day to go. That's, they're getting into another conversation there, but getting really intentional, getting conscious, getting aware, doing things differently, because unless you start to interrupt your day, interrupt the narrative, you are going to do exactly what you did yesterday and the day before that, because it's familiar, it's safe. So it's doing things differently by asking the questions and checking in with yourself.
And it's not as easy as it sounds, because we are creatures of habit. So doing the same thing at the same time in the same way, even our thought patterns, is the easiest and most comfortable thing for us. And to have different thought patterns, even if we know it's going to help us in the long run, is extremely difficult. Okay, so we're going to close off. I'm going to sum up a little bit, and then if we've got any questions, Dom can always throw those at us. So, we talked a lot about awareness, checking in with yourself, breath, not living outside of our body, physically, mentally, having those moments, micro moments in the day, encouraging that if you are a people manager. I talked about real life lifting of self-esteem, setting some realistic goals, near ones in a month, ones in 2 months, making sure they're achievable, accepting compliments, thinking about your unique qualities with managers, really encouraging teams to see the uniqueness of what different people bring, and not have this group of people who feel less than because they're not the same as everybody else in the team, and that's okay. So we talked about that as well. Trying to stop placing our value judgment in others. Not that we can do that because it's just ingrained, but starting to place the value judgment in ourselves. And that comes from those moments of awareness, because then we can think, who am I? What do I want? Where am I going with this? And that all links in with a lot of stuff I talked about with purpose, and then being grateful, the gratitude link with burnout and self-worth. Hannah, was there anything I missed there in my whistle-stop summing up?
No, I think you've wrapped it up very nicely.
But yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, it is so critical. Feeling good about yourself isn't an indulgent thing. It is the cornerstone of mental health. And if you don't feel good about yourself, everything you do in your life will be affected by that. It really, really will. So spending some time improving your sense of self is so critical. We didn't get onto, and I don't know if anyone minds if we just have 1 little minute to talk about this, because Hannah, I've been dying to ask you this and I've forgotten. Tell me about the link between self-worth and body image and body issues, which I know are so rife for men and women. I mean, a lot of self-worth issues that I hear from women and men are about their physical outer being. What can we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear it so often, even when I ask my clients, tell me one thing you like about yourself. They struggle to find that. We're constantly looking in the mirror, pulling ourselves apart, being so mean to our body. And it's, I think the quickest thing that you can do to start to switch that narrative again is to just appreciate everything your body does for you, even if you don't like its physical appearance when you look in the mirror. Thank your heart for beating, your lungs for breathing, the fact that we can walk, if you are fortunate enough to do so, the fact that we get to breathe each day, the fact that we get to wake up every single day. So I think it's just reminding yourself of what your body does for you rather than what your body looks like, because we are so much more than our body, and we're so much more than what we look like in the mirror.
I'm glad we touched on that, and I feel like we could have a whole session on that, but I did just want to touch on that because I know, although we're talking about workplace and burnout, how people feel about their physical selves can dictate so many things, and it's so sad when you speak to people about how bad they feel about how they look. So I just want to touch on that, and Hannah's takeaway there is to be grateful for what your body can do. Right, thank you. There was lots to take in there. Dom, any questions or thoughts here?
There doesn't seem to be any questions. I have got a question though, because I mean, it was really interesting to listen to it. And my question is about, at what point so say you're on a mission to become a CEO of a company, or at the top biller of your recruitment business, or whatever it is, at what point does it become unhealthy to have those aspirations? Not just being, what point does ambition become unhealthy, I guess, when it is just everything you think about?
I mean, my answer to that would be that growth, development, change, and ambition is never unhealthy as long as you are not tying your purpose and worth to it. So if you only see your purpose as that role, if suddenly that became unavailable to you because you didn't get the job, or because you became disabled and couldn't perform the job, or because you had to move countries, or because you had a very sick child that you had to care for, who knows, then you can't change how you feel about yourself if you don't get that role. So for me, ambition, growth, development is always good if you don't attach your worth and purpose to it. Hannah, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it comes back to a sense of trust with me, like to trust that, yes, it's great to have aspirations, as you say, but if something doesn't go your way, if you don't get the job, or if, you know, it doesn't quite work out, there's something better for you. There's a different path for you. So it's trusting that we all are meant to be in this place right now. If you're in a place where you're really struggling, what you're learning from that, you're building resilience from that. So everything is meant to be in how it's, you know, how it comes to us. So it's trusting where we're at in our life and where we will be redirected is going to be for us.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I mean, I used to work in recruitment, and that was the worst for it. Who was billing the most, who was getting promoted first, and it was just unbelievably competitive, but everyone was constantly comparing themselves against everyone else, which just created an unbelievably unhealthy environment for everyone, really.
And the impact, in that workplace, Dom, I'm sure that it would have maybe thrived a little bit for a little while. People were really trying hard, but the fallout of that is behaviors around it, you know, drinking, I don't know, neglecting themselves, and then ultimately you can't live like that. So there will be a crash and burn. We see it all the time.
Yeah, all the time. You'd have peaks and troughs, and that was it's like any job, isn't it? And when you have this great month in sales or whatever it might be, you feel great, and the following month it's the total opposite, and you feel like you're rubbish at your job. And that's the same in any field, I guess, of work, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just learning to not attach your worth to what happens, that you believe in yourself no matter what happens, I suppose. And it's difficult for many of us to do that, but to still be able to have ambition and to try and achieve things. There's a sweet spot, and it's not easy to find.
No.
But hopefully that has left you with some ideas, whether you manage people or whether it's just you, about feeling better in yourself, about things you can start to do, or maybe just changing perspective on how you see yourself. Maybe you never thought about how, if you're more compassionate, that actually might lead to change. So hopefully there'll be something to take away there this afternoon.
Thanks everyone for joining, and hope you enjoyed the session. And if you've got any questions, get in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.